You're in for a thrilling story with an unbelievable ending. Let's go. I'm a 38-year-old guy, and my wife, Rachel, is 36. We've been married for 12 years, together for 15. We have two beautiful kids, a nice home, and what I thought was a pretty solid marriage. Or at least, I used to think so until last week. We've had our ups and downs like any other couple, but nothing too serious. We both work full-time jobs, her as a marketing executive, and me as an engineer. Life was busy but good. Lately, though, Rachel's been traveling a lot for work. She's always had to travel a bit, but in the past 6 months, it's ramped up significantly. She'd be gone for a few days, sometimes even a week. She'd always come back with stories about meetings and client dinners. I didn't think much of it at first, but then little things started to add up. The first sign was her phone. Rachel used to leave her phone lying around the house, but now it's glued to her side. She started taking it to the bathroom, keeping it on silent, and even sleeping with it under her pillow. I'm not usually the paranoid type, but it was enough to raise a few red flags. Then, there were the late-night phone calls. She'd step out of the room or go outside to talk, claiming it was work-related. She'd always have an excuse, but the frequency of these calls made me suspicious. A couple of weeks ago, Rachel told me she had to go on a last-minute business trip to Chicago. She seemed nervous when she told me, but I brushed it off. I took care of the kids and house while she was away. On the second night she was gone, I received a call from a close friend who works in the same industry as Rachel. He mentioned he was at a conference in Chicago and wondered why I wasn't there with Rachel. He was surprised when I told him I was home with the kids because Rachel was supposed to be working. That's when I started to worry. Why would Rachel lie about going to a conference? My friend sent me a picture of the event, and sure enough, Rachel wasn't there. My heart sank. I didn't know what to think or do. My mind was racing with possibilities. When Rachel got back, I didn't confront her. Instead, I decided to keep a closer eye on her. I started checking her phone when she was in the shower or asleep. I know it's an invasion of privacy, but I needed to know the truth. Unfortunately, she'd become more cautious, and there wasn't much to find. All her messages seemed normal, and her call logs were clean. It was frustrating. Last week, Rachel told me she had another business trip, this time to New York. She seemed more distant than usual, and something in my gut told me this was it. I decided to take matters into my own hands and followed her. I took a few days off work, arranged for the kids to stay with my parents, and booked a flight to New York without telling her. When I arrived in New York, I felt like a detective on a mission. I knew where Rachel was supposed to be staying, so I checked into a hotel nearby and started my investigation. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I hoped I'd find something to explain her strange behavior. On the second day, I saw her. She wasn't alone. I watched as she walked hand in hand with a man I didn't recognize. My heart was pounding, and I felt sick to my stomach. I followed them at a distance, trying to remain unseen. They went into a fancy restaurant, laughing and talking as if they didn't have a care in the world. My worst fears were confirmed. I followed them back to a high-end apartment building. They disappeared inside, and I stood outside for what felt like hours, trying to process what I'd just seen. The woman I loved, the mother of my children, was living a double life. I couldn't believe it. Over the next few days, I gathered more information. I saw them together multiple times, acting like a happy couple. They even had a child together, a little boy who looked about 5 years old. I was in shock. Rachel had an entire second family that she'd kept hidden from me. I didn't know how to feel: angry, betrayed, devastated. It was all too much. I returned home before Rachel, trying to act normal around the kids. Inside, I was a wreck. I didn't know what to do or how to confront her. Part of me wanted to scream and shout, but I knew I needed to be smart about this. I couldn't just blow up our life without a plan. Rachel came home a few days later, acting like everything was normal. She told me all about her business trip, and I had to force myself to smile and nod. Inside, I was boiling with anger and hurt. I knew I couldn't keep this up for long, but I needed more time to figure out what to do. In the meantime, I started planning. I couldn't let Rachel get away with this, but I also didn't want to make a hasty decision that I'd regret later. I needed to protect myself and my kids. I began gathering evidence: pictures, dates, times, anything that could prove her infidelity and deceit. I also started researching divorce lawyers and custody laws. If this was going to end, I needed to be prepared. I've been living with this secret for a week now, and it's tearing me apart. Every time I look at Rachel, I feel a mix of love and hatred. I can't believe she did this to us, to our family. I want to confront her, to demand answers, but I know I need to be careful. She's been hiding this for years, and I can't underestimate her ability to lie and manipulate. I'm writing this because I need advice. How do I handle this situation? What should I do next? Has anyone else been through something like this? I feel lost and alone, and I don't know who to turn to. Any advice or support would be greatly appreciated. Some of the advice was spot on, and some of it gave me a good laugh, which I really needed. Now, I need to update you on what's been happening and get some more advice on my next steps. So after I got back from New York, I couldn't stop thinking about everything I saw. Rachel's second life, her other family, it was like something out of a bad movie. I needed to gather more evidence and make sure I was prepared for whatever came next. I spent a few days pretending everything was normal, but inside, I was dying. Every time she touched me or smiled at me, I wanted to scream at her, but I knew I had to play it cool. The first thing I did was document everything. I set up a folder on my computer with all the pictures and notes I had taken in New York. I wrote down every suspicious thing Rachel did, every time she left the house, every strange phone call. I even started recording our conversations when I could. It felt like I was living in a spy novel, but I knew I needed this evidence if I was going to confront her and protect myself and the kids. Next, I reached out to a lawyer. I found a highly recommended divorce attorney in town and set up a consultation. Walking into that office felt like admitting defeat, but I knew I needed to do this. The lawyer, John, was great. He listened to my whole story without interrupting, and then he laid out my options. He talked about custody, division of assets, and how to gather evidence. He also stressed the importance of not letting Rachel know I was onto her until I was ready to take action. That part was tough to hear, but I knew he was right. John gave me a list of things to do. Keep gathering evidence, document everything, and avoid confrontations until we had a solid plan. He also suggested I talk to a therapist to help me deal with the emotional side of things. That's something I'm still considering. For now, I'm focusing on the practical steps. One of the hardest parts was confiding in my best friend, Mike. Mike and I have been friends since college, and he's always been like a brother to me. Telling him what was going on felt like admitting I'd failed somehow, but I knew I needed someone to talk to. We met up for drinks one night, and I told him everything. At first he thought I was joking, but when he saw how serious I was, his face fell. He listened, just like John had, and then he let out a string of expletives that made me feel a bit better. Mike was furious on my behalf. He couldn't believe Rachel could do something like this. He asked if I wanted him to confront her or beat the crap out of the guy, but I told him I needed to handle this my way. He understood and promised to help however he could. We spent the rest of the night talking through my options and trying to come up with a plan. One thing Mike suggested stuck with me. He said, "If you're going to do this, do it right. Make sure she regrets every single lie she's told you." That got me thinking about how to turn the tables on Rachel in a way she'd never forget. After that night, I started planning in earnest. I needed to figure out a way to humiliate her, to make her see what she'd done to me and our family. But I couldn't be rash about it. I needed to be smart, methodical, and above all, patient. The first part of my plan was to gather even more evidence. I installed a GPS tracker on her car and a hidden camera in our bedroom. I know it sounds extreme, but I needed to know everything. It didn't take long for the GPS tracker to pay off. Rachel was making regular trips to a house in a neighboring town, probably where her other family lived. I followed her a few times, keeping my distance, and took pictures of her with the other man and their child. Each picture was like a knife in my heart, but I knew I had to keep going. While all this was going on, I kept consulting with John. He helped me sort through the evidence and plan my next steps. We decided that the best time to confront Rachel would be at a family gathering, somewhere public, where she couldn't easily escape the humiliation. It was a twisted idea, but the thought of exposing her lies in front of our friends and family gave me a strange sense of satisfaction. In the meantime, I decided to reach out to Rachel's other family. I needed to know if they were aware of her double life. I drove to the house. Don't even ask me how I knew where they lived, where I'd seen her with the other man and their child. My heart was pounding as I knocked on the door. A man, who I assumed was Rachel's other partner, opened the door. He looked confused, but he invited me in when I told him I had something important to discuss. As soon as I stepped inside, I felt a wave of nausea. This was the home Rachel had built with someone else, the life she had created behind my back. The place was cozy, filled with pictures of the other man, David, their son, and Rachel. Seeing those pictures was like a punch to the gut, but I had to keep my emotions in check. I was here for answers. We sat down in the living room, and I could hear the sound of cartoons playing in another room. Their son was there, oblivious to the storm about to hit his family. I took a deep breath and started explaining why I was there. I told David that Rachel was my wife and that we had 2 children together. He looked shocked and kept glancing at the hallway, probably hoping his son wouldn't walk in. David's face went pale as I showed him the pictures I had taken in New York. He was visibly shaken, struggling to process what I was telling him. I had no idea, he kept saying. I thought we were a family. I explained that Rachel had been living a double life for years, deceiving both of us. I shared the details I had gathered, the overlapping timelines, the lies, the excuses. David listened in stunned silence, occasionally shaking his head in disbelief. "Why would she do this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," I replied, "but we need to figure out what to do next. She can't keep getting away with this." We talked for hours, comparing notes and trying to piece together the full extent of Rachel's deception. David told me about how they met, how she had moved in with him shortly after their son was born. He thought she was the love of his life, the mother of his child, and that they were building a future together. Learning the truth was devastating for him. At one point, David broke down, tears streaming down his face as he realized the depth of Rachel's betrayal. I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for him. We were both victims in this twisted game she was playing. I reached out and put a hand on his shoulder, trying to offer some comfort. "We'll get through this," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "We have to." We agreed that we needed to confront Rachel, but we had to be smart about it. We couldn't just storm in and start accusing her without a plan. That's when I told David about the upcoming family party. It was the perfect opportunity to reveal the truth in front of everyone, to make sure Rachel couldn't talk her way out of it. David was hesitant at first, worried about the impact on their son, but he eventually agreed. We both needed closure, and Rachel needed to face the consequences of her actions. We decided to keep in touch and coordinate our efforts. I promised to handle the logistics and make sure everything was set up for the confrontation. Leaving David's house that day was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I felt like I was walking away from a car crash, knowing there were more victims than I initially realized. Rachel's betrayal had cut deep, and the fallout was going to be even more painful. When I got back home, I had to keep pretending everything was normal. Rachel was her usual self, completely unaware of what I had discovered and the plan we were putting in motion. It was torture, but I knew I had to stay strong for the sake of our children and for David and his son. As the date of the party approached, I put the final touches on my plan. I created a slideshow with all the pictures and videos I had gathered, set to play on a loop. I rehearsed what I was going to say, how I was going to reveal Rachel's betrayal. It felt surreal, like I was preparing for a twisted play. The day of the party arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves, but I knew I had to see this through. Rachel was her usual self, chatting and laughing with everyone, completely unaware of what was about to happen. I felt a strange mix of excitement and dread. This was it, the moment I'd been planning for weeks. I coordinated with David to arrive at the party halfway through, making it seem like a surprise visit. When he walked in with their son, I saw the color drain from Rachel's face. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. The room fell silent as everyone turned to see who had just walked in. David walked up to Rachel, his face a mask of controlled anger. "Hello, Rachel," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Surprised to see me?" Rachel stammered, trying to come up with an explanation, but the shock was too great. She looked around the room, realizing that there was no way out. David didn't give her a chance to speak. He pulled out the pictures I had taken and started handing them out to the guests. "This is who you've been lying to," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "This is the family you've been betraying." As people looked at the pictures, gasps and whispers filled the room. Rachel's face went from pale to bright red, and she started to shake. I stood back, watching as the truth unfolded in front of everyone. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction, but also a deep sadness. This was the end of our marriage, and the life I thought we had was over. Rachel tried to speak, to defend herself, but no one was listening. The guests were too shocked, too horrified by what they were seeing. David and I had done it. We had exposed her for the liar she was. I'll update you all soon on what happened next. Thanks again for all the support and advice. I couldn't have gotten this far without you. Stay tuned for the next update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the support on my previous posts. Things have been incredibly intense and emotional since the last update. I need to share what's been happening and get some more advice on how to move forward. So I felt like I didn't fully cover that party, so I'd like to flesh it out a little bit. So the day of the party was like a nightmare come to life. As planned, David arrived halfway through with their son. The moment they walked in, it was like all the air was sucked out of the room. Everyone stopped talking and all eyes were on Rachel. I saw the color drain from her face as she realized what was happening. David walked straight up to Rachel, their son clinging to his leg, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Hello, Rachel. Surprised to see me?" Rachel stammered, trying to come up with an explanation. But the shock was too great. She looked around the room, realizing that there was no way out. David didn't give her a chance to speak. He started handing out the pictures I had taken, showing her with him and their son, living her double life. The reactions from our family and friends were immediate. There were gasps, whispers, and looks of horror and disbelief. Rachel's parents, who had been standing nearby, looked utterly devastated. Her mother started crying, while her father's face turned a deep shade of red with anger. Rachel herself just stood there, shaking and unable to form a coherent sentence. "You've been lying to all of us," David said, his voice shaking with emotion. "You've been living a double life, betraying not just one family but two." After the initial shock wore off, the guests started to leave, unable to bear the tension and drama any longer. Rachel's parents stayed behind, still in shock and disbelief. Rachel herself was a mess, crying and pleading with everyone to listen to her side of the story, but no one was interested. I took Rachel's parents aside to talk. They were heartbroken, unable to understand how their daughter could do something like this. I promised them that they could still see their grandchildren. This was an emotional conversation, filled with tears and anguish. "Please, don't take the kids away from us," Rachel's mother begged, tears streaming down her face. "We love them so much." I felt a lump in my throat as I tried to reassure her. "You'll still see them," I said, my voice shaking. "They need their grandparents, and I won't take that away from them." "But Rachel VGLs, she can't be trusted. I have to protect my children." Rachel's father, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "How could she do this?" he asked, his voice filled with pain. "We raised her better than this." I had no answers for him. All I could do was promise that I would take care of the kids and make sure they were loved and safe. It was a heartbreaking conversation, one I never thought I'd have to have. After the party, things only got worse for Rachel. I made sure to tell everyone at her workplace about what she had done. It wasn't hard to spread the word. I sent the pictures and a detailed explanation of her double life to her boss and colleagues. The fallout was immediate. Rachel was humiliated, unable to face her coworkers. She tried to continue working, but the whispers and judgmental looks made it impossible. Eventually, she resigned, unable to bear the shame. Meanwhile, David was putting significant pressure on Rachel. He was furious, feeling just as betrayed as I did. He demanded explanations, apologies, and answers she couldn't provide. The stress was taking a visible toll on her. She looked like a shadow of her former self, constantly on edge, knowing that her world was collapsing around her. At home, the atmosphere was toxic. Rachel tried to talk to me, to explain and apologize, but I couldn't bear to listen. "You destroyed our family," I told her one night, unable to contain my anger. "How could you lie to me for so long?" She sobbed, pleading for forgiveness, but I had none to give. "I don't know what to do," she cried. "Please, just let me explain." "There's nothing you can say to fix this," I shot back. "You lied to everyone. You've shattered everything." The conflicts escalated, becoming more frequent and intense. One night, after yet another heated argument, I had enough. "You need to leave," I said, my voice trembling with anger. You can't stay here anymore. Rachel looked at me, stunned. Where am I supposed to go? She asked, her voice breaking. I don't care, I replied coldly. You can stay with David or go to a hotel. Just get out. She packed a bag, tears streaming down her face. The kids were asleep, blissfully unaware of the storm raging around them. As she walked out the door, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. This was the right thing to do, but it was tearing our family apart. The next few days were a blur of emotions. Rachel's departure left a void in the house, but it also brought a sense of calm. The constant tension was gone, replaced by an eerie silence. I focused on the kids, trying to provide some stability and normalcy. They were confused and hurt, not understanding why their mom was gone. Rachel's parents were devastated by her actions, but they understood why I had to kick her out. They visited the kids often, trying to provide support and love during this difficult time. Each visit was filled with tears and apologies. Rachel's mother would hug the kids tightly, whispering reassurances through her sobs. One particularly emotional visit stands out. Rachel's mother sat on the couch, holding our youngest child in her lap. I'm so sorry, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I never thought she could do something like this. I sat beside her, struggling to hold back my own tears. It's not your fault, I said softly. You raised her well. She made these choices on her own. Rachel's father, who had been standing by the window, turned to face us. We'll support you and the kids, he said, his voice trembling. Whatever you need, we're here for you. Their support meant the world to me, and it was a small comfort in the midst of the chaos. Despite everything, they were still my children's grandparents, and I wanted them to be a part of their lives. Meanwhile, Rachel's situation continued to deteriorate. She was staying with David, but their relationship was strained to the breaking point. The pressure from him was relentless. He demanded answers and explanations, and Rachel was unable to provide them. She was a wreck, caught between the life she had destroyed and the one she had tried to build with lies. David called me one night, his voice filled with anger and frustration. She's a mess, he said. She doesn't know what to do. This whole situation is a disaster. I know, I replied, feeling a strange sense of solidarity with him. But she brought this on herself. We need to focus on the kids and make sure they're okay. The court proceedings were looming, and I was preparing for a fierce battle. I wanted full custody of the kids. Rachel's betrayal had shown me that she wasn't fit to be a mother, and I couldn't trust her to take care of them. This decision led to more intense conflicts and heated arguments. Rachel was desperate, trying to hold on to any shred of her old life, but I was determined to protect my children from her lies. One night, after a particularly vicious argument over the phone, Rachel showed up at the house, demanding to see the kids. You can't keep them from me, she yelled, her face red with anger and tears. They're my children too. They deserve better than this, I shot back. You lied to them, to all of us. You're not fit to be their mother. Rachel tried to push past me, but I blocked her way. The shouting woke the kids and they came downstairs, their faces pale and scared. Our oldest child clung to my leg, crying and begging us to stop fighting. That moment broke something inside me. Seeing the fear and confusion on my child's face made me realize just how much damage this whole situation was causing. I picked up my child and held them close, whispering reassurances, while Rachel stood there, tears streaming down her face. Please, she sobbed. I just want to see them. You need to leave, I said firmly. You're only making things worse. Rachel left, and I spent the rest of the night comforting the kids, trying to explain what was happening without causing them more pain. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. In the days that followed, I focused on the kids, trying to provide some sense of stability and normalcy. I knew the road ahead was going to be rough, filled with legal battles and emotional turmoil, but I was determined to get through it for their sake. Rachel's life continued to unravel. Her parents, who had initially been supportive, started to distance themselves as the full extent of her betrayal sank in. They couldn't understand how their daughter could have done something so terrible, and they were struggling to come to terms with it. Rachel was isolated, cut off from her friends, her family, and her job. The pressure from David didn't let up either. He was relentless, demanding custody of their son and threatening legal action. Despite everything, I tried to remain civil for the sake of the kids. I arranged supervised visits with Rachel, making sure the kids could still see their mother without being exposed to her toxic behavior. Each visit was tense and emotional, with Rachel trying to connect with the kids while they struggled to understand why their family was falling apart. As the days turned into weeks, the strain took its toll on all of us. The kids were acting out, confused and scared by the changes in their lives. I did my best to be there for them, but it was hard. The constant stress and conflict were wearing me down, and I felt like I was barely holding on. One night, after a particularly difficult day, I sat down and wrote out everything that had happened, from the moment I discovered Rachel's betrayal to the present. It was cathartic, putting all my thoughts and emotions into words. I realized that no matter how hard things got, I had to keep going for the sake of my children. As I finished writing, I felt a renewed sense of determination. I knew the road ahead would be tough, but I was ready to face it. I had to protect my children, rebuild my life, and find a way to move forward from the wreckage of my marriage. Hey everyone, thanks for all the support on my previous posts. It's been incredibly intense and emotional since the last update. I need to share what's been happening and get some more advice from you all. First of all, I want to say how much your support means to me. Sharing my story online has been a lifeline. Every comment, message, and piece of advice has helped me get through this nightmare. Knowing that there are people out there who understand and care has made a huge difference. I've been reading all your comments, and I can't thank you enough for your support. Things took a turn for the worse when Rachel tried to take the kids. She showed up one day demanding to see them. She was frantic, almost hysterical, and I could tell something was off. She kept saying that she needed to take the kids with her, that they belonged with her. I refused, of course. The situation quickly escalated, and Rachel tried to force her way into the house. In the chaos, she grabbed our youngest and tried to run. I had no choice but to call the police. When they arrived, Rachel was screaming and crying, holding on to our child for dear life. The police had to physically separate her from the kids and calm her down. It was a heartbreaking scene, and I could see the confusion and fear in my children's eyes. Watching their mother being restrained by the police was something I never wanted them to experience. The police took Rachel away, and I was left to pick up the pieces. I had to explain to the kids what had happened, trying to make sense of the madness. It was a tough conversation, filled with tears and confusion. They didn't understand why their mom was acting this way, and I struggled to find the right words to reassure them. A few days later, I found out that Rachel had been admitted to the hospital. The stress and pressure had taken a toll on her, and she had a breakdown. Part of me felt sorry for her, but another part of me was angry that she had let things get to this point. Her actions were tearing our family apart, and I didn't know how much more the kids could take. Despite being in the hospital, Rachel continued to manipulate and cause conflict. She would call me, crying and begging for forgiveness one minute, then accusing me of ruining her life the next. It was emotionally exhausting. I tried to keep my distance, but it was hard when she kept finding ways to get under my skin. Meanwhile, I started to struggle with my own demons. The stress and pressure of everything were getting to me, and I found myself turning to alcohol to cope. It started with a drink or two to take the edge off, but it quickly escalated. I was drinking more and more, trying to numb the pain and escape the reality of my situation. I knew it wasn't healthy, but I felt trapped in a cycle I couldn't break. During the day, I tried to maintain a sense of normalcy for the kids. I would get up early, make breakfast, and get them ready for school. After dropping them off, I'd head to work, but my mind was always elsewhere. The constant stress and worry were affecting my performance, and my boss noticed. Thankfully, he was understanding and supportive, giving me the flexibility I needed to deal with my personal life. In the evenings, I would pick up the kids, help them with their homework, and try to engage them in activities to keep their minds off the chaos. We'd play board games, watch movies, or go for walks in the park. I wanted to create as many positive memories as possible to counterbalance the turmoil they were experiencing. I also made an effort to socialize and spend time with friends. Mike, my best friend, was a constant support. We'd meet up for drinks, or just hang out at his place, talking about everything and nothing. Those moments of normalcy were a lifeline, reminding me that there was still a world outside the madness of my home life. I also picked up some old hobbies to distract myself. I started running again, something I used to love, but had let fall by the wayside. It was a great way to clear my head and release some of the pent-up stress. I joined a local running club, which helped me meet new people and build a support network outside of my immediate circle. One evening, after a particularly rough day, I sat down to write. I poured my heart out, detailing everything that had happened since discovering Rachel's betrayal. It was cathartic, putting all my thoughts and emotions into words. As I wrote, I realized that no matter how hard things got, I had to keep going for the sake of my children. Rachel's parents continued to visit the kids regularly. Each visit was bittersweet. They loved their grandchildren deeply, but the shadow of Rachel's actions loomed over every interaction. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, we had another heart-to-heart conversation. Rachel's mother, tears in her eyes, said, "We just want what's best for the kids. We're so sorry for everything that's happened." "I know," I replied softly. "You've been wonderful, and the kids need you. I promise, no matter what happens, you'll always be a part of their lives." Rachel's father, usually a man of few words, looked at me with deep sadness. "Thank you," he said. "We'll support you however we can. The kids deserve stability and love." Their support gave me strength, and I felt a renewed determination to keep fighting for my children's future. But the situation with Rachel continued to spiral out of control. One night she came home, soaking wet and looking disheveled. She knocked on the door, and when I opened it, she collapsed into my arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "What happened?" I asked, trying to get her to stand up. "My money! It's all gone!" she cried. "My car was wrecked, and I have nowhere else to go." I felt a surge of anger and frustration. Despite everything she had done, she was still causing chaos in our lives. I helped her inside and gave her a towel to dry off. "Why are you here, Rachel?" I asked, my voice filled with exasperation. "I didn't know where else to go," she whispered. "I'm so sorry for everything. Please, just let me stay for the night." I reluctantly agreed, but only for the kids' sake. They saw her and immediately ran to her, crying and hugging her. It was a painful reminder of how much they missed their mom, despite everything that had happened. The next morning, I sat down with Rachel to talk. "Rachel, you can't keep doing this," I said, my voice firm but tired. "This back and forth, the chaos, it's destroying us. It's hurting the kids." She nodded, looking defeated. I know, she whispered. "I just don't know what to do anymore." "Listen," I said, trying to stay calm. "I've asked you before to consider an amicable divorce, to settle things without going to court. For the sake of the kids, we need to end this peacefully. Will you agree to it now?" Rachel looked at me, tears welling up in her eyes again. "No," she said softly but firmly. "I won't give up on my children. I can't." I sighed, feeling a mix of frustration and resignation. "Then I'll have to schedule a trial," I said. "I don't want to do this, but you're leaving me no choice." As soon as I said that, Rachel's demeanor changed. She became defensive, almost combative. "You're just trying to take everything from me," she accused. "You're poisoning the kids against me." "That's not true, Rachel," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I'm trying to protect them. Look at what's happened, how unstable things have been. They need stability. They need to know they're safe." The argument escalated quickly, voices raised and tempers flaring. The kids heard us and came into the room, looking scared. I immediately regretted letting things get out of hand in front of them. "We're done talking about this for now," I said, trying to de-escalate the situation. "We'll talk again when we're calmer." Rachel left that day, and I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. The kids were confused, and I did my best to comfort them. "Mommy is going through a tough time," I explained gently, "but everything will be okay, I promise. Thanks again for all the support and advice. It means the world to me. I'll keep you all updated as things progress. Stay tuned for the next update." Hey everyone, thanks for sticking with me through this crazy journey. Rachel and I finally sat down to discuss everything. We knew we had to come to an agreement on all the issues: custody, finances, the house. But it was like talking to a brick wall. Despite everything, Rachel was not satisfied with anything we discussed. I tried to be fair, offering what I thought was a reasonable split, especially since I earned significantly more. But every suggestion I made was met with resistance. "I need more than that," Rachel insisted, her voice shaking with frustration. "I can't survive on what you're offering." "Rachel, I'm already giving you more than half of what we have," I replied, struggling to keep my composure. I need to make sure the kids are taken care of too. This isn't just about you. The arguments went in circles with neither of us willing to budge. It became clear that we weren't going to reach an agreement on our own, so we decided to turn to a mediator. I hoped that having a neutral third party would help us find some common ground. Unfortunately, even with the mediator, things didn't improve. Rachel was adamant about her demands, and I couldn't agree to them without jeopardizing my ability to provide for the kids. The mediation sessions were tense and filled with hostility. The mediator tried their best to guide us toward a compromise, but it was like trying to mix oil and water. In the end, it became obvious that mediation wasn't going to work. The issues were too deeply rooted, and Rachel's emotions were too raw. We were at an impasse, and the only option left was to let the court decide. The looming court date was a dark cloud hanging over everything, but I knew it was inevitable. Amid all the chaos, I needed to find some peace and normalcy for the kids. My parents had invited us to spend a week at their house in another city, and it seemed like the perfect escape. The kids were excited about the trip, and I hoped it would give us all a chance to relax and reconnect. We packed up and headed to my parents' house, nestled in a small town surrounded by nature. The change of scenery was a breath of fresh air. The kids' faces lit up when they saw their grandparents, and the warm welcome from my parents made me feel a bit more hopeful. The week was filled with family activities. We went fishing at a nearby lake, spending hours on the water, laughing and bonding. The kids were thrilled when they caught their first fish, and the pride on their faces was priceless. My dad and I took them hunting, teaching them about the wilderness and the importance of respecting nature. Swimming in the lake was another highlight. The kids splashed around, their laughter echoing across the water. It was the happiest I'd seen them in a long time, and it reminded me of what really mattered. In those moments, the stress and tension of the past months seemed to melt away. In the evenings, we'd gather around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and telling stories. The kids loved hearing about my childhood adventures, and it felt good to share those memories with them. My mom would make her famous apple pie, and we'd sit together, enjoying the simple pleasures of life. But even in this idyllic setting, Rachel found a way to intrude. One evening, I got a frantic call from her. She was standing on a bridge, threatening to jump. My heart raced as I tried to calm her down, my mind spinning with fear and worry. "Rachel, please," I pleaded. "Think about the kids. They need you." "They don't need me," she sobbed. "I've ruined everything." "Listen to me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We'll get through this. Just come down from the bridge, please." Thankfully, the police arrived in time to pull her away from the edge. She was taken to a psychiatric hospital for evaluation. The news was a heavy blow, and it cast a shadow over our trip. I had to explain to the kids why their mom wasn't answering their calls, trying to reassure them without causing more worry. Despite this incident, I tried to make the most of our time with my parents. We continued our activities, but there was an underlying tension. I couldn't shake the image of Rachel on that bridge, and it haunted me. I knew she needed help, and I hoped that being in the hospital would be the start of her getting it. One evening, as the sun set over the lake, I sat with my dad on the porch, watching the kids play. He looked at me, his eyes filled with concern. "You're doing a great job, son," he said. "I know this is tough, but you're holding it together for the kids. They need you to be strong." "I'm trying, Dad," I replied, feeling a lump in my throat. "But sometimes it feels like too much. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." He put a hand on my shoulder. "You're stronger than you think, and you're not alone. We're here for you, every step of the way." His words were a comfort, and they gave me the strength to keep going. I needed to stay strong for my kids, to be the rock they could rely on. As the week came to an end, we packed up and headed back home. The kids were sad to leave, but they were also excited to see their friends and get back to their routine. The trip had been a much-needed break, and it had reminded me of the importance of family and support. Back home, the reality of our situation hit me again. Rachel was still in the psychiatric hospital, and I knew the court date was approaching. I tried to focus on the positives, on the moments of joy and connection we'd had during our trip. But the weight of everything was still there, a constant reminder of the challenges ahead. I continued to share my feelings online, finding solace in the support and advice from strangers who had become a lifeline. The comments and messages were a source of strength, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this fight. One particularly rough day, I received a message from someone who had been through a similar situation. They shared their story and offered words of encouragement. Reading their message, I felt a renewed sense of hope. If they could get through it, so could I. Rachel's situation remained precarious. She had good days and bad days, and the doctors were trying to find the right treatment to help her. Despite everything, I hoped that she would find some peace and stability. For the sake of our kids, I wanted her to get better. In the meantime, I focused on creating a stable and loving environment for the kids. We continued our routines, and I made sure to spend quality time with them every day. Whether it was playing games, helping with homework, or just talking about their day, I wanted them to feel secure and loved. As the court date loomed, I prepared myself for the battle ahead. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to fight for what was best for my children. The support from my parents, friends, and the online community gave me the strength to keep going. I also reached out to a therapist for myself, realizing that I needed help to navigate the emotional turmoil. Talking to a professional helped me process my feelings and find healthier ways to cope with the stress. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I sat down to write again. I poured my heart out, detailing everything that had happened, the ups and downs, the moments of hope and despair. Writing had become a form of therapy, a way to make sense of the chaos. As I finished, I felt a sense of clarity. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I knew I had the strength to face whatever came next. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking with me through this crazy journey. It's been a roller coaster of emotions and conflicts, and I need to share what's going on and get some more advice from you all. The court date was supposed to be this week, but Rachel's condition took another turn. Her lawyer came to see her and found her in an unstable state. As a result, the court had to reschedule. Initially, this felt like yet another setback, but it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. These past 2 weeks have been the calmest we've experienced in a long time. It was a much-needed break from the turmoil of the previous months. The tension seemed to ease, and there was a sense of relief in the air. Perhaps it was the anticipation of the upcoming court proceedings or a temporary lull in the storm, but for now, there was a semblance of peace. During this time, I focused on spending quality moments with the kids. We did more of the activities we enjoyed, playing board games, going for walks, and watching movies together. It was heartwarming to see them smile and laugh, to feel a bit of normalcy return to our lives. I also made sure to keep up with my therapy sessions and my hobbies, like running, to keep myself grounded. Finally, Rachel began to feel better. Her treatment seemed to be working, and she was more stable. This improvement meant she could attend the court session, which was now rescheduled for the following week. I've had a lot of people asking me why I don't talk about what's happening in Rachel's relationship with her lover. To be honest, I feel that sharing those details wouldn't be appropriate. This story is about my journey and my children's well-being. The other aspects, while they're part of the story, aren't something I feel comfortable delving into deeply. It's enough to know that her relationship with him is also strained and complicated. The day before the court hearing was filled with a mix of anxiety and cautious optimism. I spent the day preparing documents, talking to my lawyer, and making sure I had everything in order. That evening, I spent extra time with the kids, playing their favorite games and reading them stories before bed. I wanted to ensure they felt secure and loved, despite the looming uncertainty. The morning of the court hearing, I woke up early, my mind racing with thoughts of what was to come. I went for a run to clear my head, and it helped me focus. Afterward, I got dressed in my best suit, hoping to present myself as composed and confident. I made breakfast for the kids, trying to keep the routine as normal as possible. An hour before the court session, I dropped the kids off at my parents' house. They were nervous, sensing the tension in the air, but I reassured them that everything would be okay. "I'll see you later," I said, giving them both a tight hug. "Just remember, I love you very much." Walking into the courtroom, I felt a wave of anxiety. Rachel was already there, looking composed but fragile. Her lawyer stood by her side, flipping through a stack of papers. My lawyer John greeted me with a firm handshake. "We're ready," he said confidently. The courtroom was filled with a few spectators, some family members, friends, and a couple of curious onlookers. The judge entered, and everyone stood up. My heart pounded as the proceedings began. John presented our case meticulously. He laid out all the evidence of Rachel's unstable behavior, her attempts to take the kids, and the impact her actions had on our family. He spoke passionately about the need for stability and safety for the children, emphasizing my role as their primary caregiver. Rachel's lawyer tried to counter, arguing that she was a loving mother who had made mistakes but was working hard to get better. They highlighted her progress in treatment and her desire to maintain a relationship with the children. Then it was my turn to speak. I took a deep breath and stood up, addressing the judge directly. Your Honor, this has been the most challenging time of my life. My primary concern is and always has been the well-being of my children. They need stability, love, and a safe environment. I've done everything in my power to provide that for them, and I believe that's what they need moving forward. Rachel also had a chance to speak. She broke down in tears, apologizing for her actions and pleading for a chance to be part of the children's lives. It was a heartbreaking moment, and I could see the pain in her eyes. After what felt like an eternity, the judge took a moment to review everything. The tension in the room was palpable. Finally, the judge looked up and began to speak. This court's primary concern is the welfare of the children. Based on the evidence presented, it's clear that stability and consistency are crucial at this time. Therefore, I'm granting primary custody to the father, with supervised visitation for the mother until further review. Relief washed over me, mixed with a tinge of sadness. This wasn't a victory to celebrate, but a necessary step to ensure my children's safety and stability. Rachel looked devastated, and her parents, who were in the courtroom, looked equally heartbroken. I felt a pang of sympathy, but knew this was the right decision. After the court session, I took a moment to gather myself. John patted me on the back. "You did great," he said. "This was the best outcome for the kids." I thanked him and walked outside, taking a deep breath of fresh air. The weight of the past few months seemed a little lighter, but I knew this was just one step in a long journey. The aftermath of the court decision brought a mix of emotions. Rachel was heartbroken, but she complied with the judge's orders. The supervised visits were challenging, filled with tension and awkwardness, but I hoped they would improve over time. I took the kids out for ice cream to celebrate the end of the court battle. They didn't fully understand what had happened, but they sensed a change. We talked about school, their friends, and our plans for the weekend. It was a simple moment of joy that reminded me why all this was worth it. Thanks again for all the support and advice. It means the world to me. I'll keep you all updated as things progress. Stay tuned for the next update. Hey everyone, it's been a while since I last updated you. This is going to be my final post, and I wanted to share how things have unfolded over the past year since the divorce. After the court ruling, life gradually began to settle into a new rhythm. The kids and I focused on building a stable and loving home. The immediate aftermath of the court decision was a mix of relief and sadness, but I knew it was the right move for our family. Rachel, on the other hand, hit rock bottom. She moved in with her parents and practically never left the house. She had lost her job and was now working in a rundown bar to make ends meet. The woman I had once loved was now a shadow of her former self. She hardly spent any time with the kids, choosing instead to speak to them on the phone. She said she didn't want them to see her in such a state, and though it broke my heart, I understood. The kids missed her, but they also seemed to adapt to the new normal with surprising resilience. For me, the year was about rebuilding and rediscovering myself. I focused on my career, and the stability at home allowed me to excel at work. I started getting involved in new projects and took on more responsibility. It felt good to be appreciated and to contribute meaningfully after the emotional roller coaster of the divorce. Socially, I began to reconnect with old friends and make new ones. Mike was a constant presence, always there to lend an ear or a helping hand. We'd often go out for drinks or just hang out, and those moments of camaraderie were a balm to my soul. I also joined a local running club and started participating in events. Running had always been a passion of mine, and it was therapeutic to get back into it. About 6 months after the divorce, I met someone new. Her name was Emily. Of course, that's not her real name, and we clicked immediately. She was kind, understanding, and incredibly supportive. Emily knew about my past and accepted me for who I was. Our relationship started slowly, and I was careful not to rush into anything. The kids took to her quickly, and seeing them bond with her was a joy. Emily brought a lightness to my life that I hadn't felt in a long time. One of the most fulfilling aspects of the past year was watching my kids thrive. They adjusted well to the new routine and seemed genuinely happy. We created new traditions and made many happy memories together. From family movie nights to weekend getaways, we focused on enjoying our time together. The bond between us grew stronger, and it was clear that the stability and love they experienced at home made a huge difference. Reflecting on the year, I realized how far we had come. There were times when I doubted my decisions, especially after reading some of the comments online about how cruelly I had treated Rachel. But I knew deep down that I had done what was necessary to protect my children and give them the best chance at a happy, stable life. If I hadn't left Rachel, I would have been much worse off, and so would the kids. Rachel's situation remained dire. Her relationship with David had ended, and she was now completely dependent on her parents. She rarely left their house, preferring to stay in her room, and the few times she did venture out, it was only to go to work. Her parents were deeply saddened by her state, but they continued to support her as best they could. They were also very involved with the kids, often taking them for weekends and holidays, which helped maintain some semblance of family connection. There were moments of hope, though. Rachel's parents shared with me that she had started therapy again, and there were small signs of improvement. She was slowly coming to terms with her actions and working on rebuilding her life. It was a long road, but I hoped for her sake and the kids that she would eventually find her way back. Emily and I continued to grow closer. She was patient and understanding, knowing that my primary focus was my kids. We talked about the future and the possibility of blending our families. It was a delicate balance, but we navigated it together, always keeping the kids' best interests at heart. They adored her, and she became a loving presence in their lives. Emily took my hand and squeezed it gently. "You did what you had to do to protect your kids and yourself," she said softly. "It's not about what others think. You've created a loving, stable home for your children, and that's what matters." Her words resonated with me, and I felt a sense of peace. It wasn't about seeking validation from others. It was about knowing in my heart that I had made the right choices for my family. The year had its share of challenges, but it also brought moments of joy and growth. The kids and I continued to create happy memories together. We took a memorable trip to the mountains, where we hiked, camped, and spent quality time away from the chaos of everyday life. It was a chance to reconnect with nature and with each other, and it strengthened our bond even more. Thank you all for being there for me through this journey. Your support has been invaluable, and I'm grateful for every message, comment, and piece of advice. I wish you all the best in your own journeys, and I hope that my story has offered some hope and insight.